All you gotta do is relax, sit back. Let me tell a little story. I used to love sports, baseball and basketball. Actually, I lied. I hated baseball. I love basketball and football. Running track, yes sir, run it back. All day sports was the best thing. Madden 09, the best thing.
Thank you, Mr. Little B, for playing us in. And welcome back to the Coin Toss Podcast, coming to you not quite live from Spain and Los Angeles. They're pretty much the same place. We all speak Spanish here.
What I've heard, though, is that Los Angeles has been getting a little bit of rain. Is this true?
Torrential rain at some points. I remember last night the rain was coming down in sheets all over my house, and but it only came down at night and only for a few hours at a time. And now it's nice and sunny.
That's good. That's good. Well, Spain has very similar weather to Los Angeles, so this transition has been eased by my wardrobe essentially remaining the same. So that's good, I guess.
Well, it is going to be winter somewhat soon, isn't it?
Yeah. Right now the sun is rising at 8 a.m. and it's only going to get worse. And I'm not looking forward to me spending my first winter season ever. I've never spent an entire season in a place that has seasons. So this is going to be a very interesting phenomenon.
I did it in Washington, D.C., and I rather liked it. I even took walks while it was driving snow, and I was the only ones on the street. But anyway, back to what we're here to talk about. You know what time it is, Christian?
Well, for me, it's about 7:37.
That's not what time it is. It's time for playoff baseball, bitches.
Okay. That too, I guess.
So, playoff baseball.
Terribly underreported over here in Europe, which is a shame in my opinion, but the very intriguing and very strange 2015 season has come to an end, and now we are beginning with the playoffs. So what are your first impressions?
Well, let's do an overview of each league, starting with the National League. We got the two wild card spots. Not Padres, definitely not the Padres. The Pirates and the Cubs are going to be playing their one-game wild card playoff in Pittsburgh, just like it was last year when San Francisco came to Pittsburgh on their first stop to eventually winning the title. So I bet Pittsburgh's going to really want to get this done. But Chicago looks really good, so that's going to be a game to watch. I believe that's on Wednesday. What are your thoughts on that game, first of all?
Well, this is the third straight year the Pirates have entered into the one-game playoff, winning their first year and losing in their second year against the Giants. What I think most baseball fans are lamenting is that this Pirates-Cubs matchup will be limited to one game. One of the strange coincidences of the 2015 season was that the three best teams in baseball all happened to play in the same division, which relegates the Pirates and the Cubs to this one-game phenomenon. But this is a unforeseen symptom of the one-game playoff. Had this been played under the old system, the Cubs would not have been a playoff team. The third best team in baseball would not have had a chance for a World Series title, and that the Pirates and the Cubs will both have a chance to play essentially for the division crown once they go up against the Cardinals in the division series. It at least has afforded them an opportunity, and this is going to be probably the most exciting one-game playoff in the preparation up to the one-game playoff that we have seen thus far. And I really hope that you'll tune in.
Oh, hell yes. And the winner of that one-game playoff gets to face the king of their division, the St. Louis Cardinals. The evil, hacking, cheating, horrible Cardinals.
Yeah, what happened to that hacking scandal?
Don't know. That went away.
That is some FBI-level chicanery that we have just decided to brush aside. Why aren't we talking more about this Ocean's 11 phenomenon that the Cardinals have brought upon us?
I assume it's the whole investigation is ongoing business. But what I do know for sure is that everyone outside of St. Louis will be rooting for the winner of the Pirates-Cubs game in that series.
I wouldn't be too sure of that. The Cardinals have a very large geographic area of influence. All of Arkansas is Cardinals nations for goodness sakes. But yeah, the Cardinals franchise, once beloved across the nation, has all of a sudden reared its ugly head. Their social media platform is terrible. If you ever have a chance to laugh at
But
videos,
is it
laugh
all
at
about...
everything the Cardinals do. Oh, it's just cheese
It's like
bomb,
best fans in
fantastic.
baseball and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, it's awful. And couple that with their fans' reaction to the protest in Ferguson last year and this FBI level hacking scandal. There's no good reason to root for the Cardinals unless you're a fan of well-run organizations and fundamental baseball that the Cardinals seem to do every single year.
That's true. So, in the other National League Division Series, our two teams are meeting each other. The Dodgers have secured home field advantage. It starts on Friday. Are you ready to go to war, Christian?
Ish. I mean, I'm sure Major League Baseball loves this matchup. The media markets, Los Angeles, New York, even though it's like less than 30% of New York, then they'll be slobbering over the potential ratings. But this also happens to be the series that pits the two least interesting teams in baseball, in my opinion. Currently, the Dodgers and I'm pretty sure the Mets have the second worst record of the division winners, and the Dodgers aren't far behind. So
Well,
I'm
just because
I'm
their records aren't the best doesn't mean they're not interesting. I mean, the Dodgers turn out Kershaw and Greinke at you for the first two games, and the Mets have an excellent rotation with, Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, and the rest. And I think that pitching matchup is going to make for a very interesting series. And the Mets certainly have the hotter hand on offense, I would think, which is a funny thing to say. Because I remember when we went to that Mets game in July, they were right in the middle of their slump, and I remember they put up 8 runs on the Dodgers, and you're like, why are they using all their runs for this road trip on this one game?
Yeah, for a couple months, the Mets were not only the worst offensive team in baseball, but they were setting franchise lows in a franchise that has not been known for putting up any offensive success. That they turned it around almost.
Entirely opposite. They set records for franchise offense after the Cespedes
Yeah,
trade.
yeah, it's pretty incredible, this offensive turnaround that the Mets have initiated for themselves. But call me a pessimist, but I'm not feeling terribly optimistic about the Mets' chances, and which is too bad because I take a look at both rosters. I take a look at what both teams have done this year, and I could easily argue that the Mets have a better better chance at beating the Dodgers in every facet of the game. The problem is the Dodgers are throwing out Kershaw and Greinke, who are pitching like Koufax and Drysdale right now. And if there's anything that has shown to be successful in the playoffs, having a 1-2 starting combination that are arguably the best in baseball is damn near impossible to beat.
Yeah, that's definitely the Dodgers' ace up their sleeve. Well, it's not necessarily up their sleeve because everybody knows they have it. But
Aces, I would say.
yes, ace is. But one other thing about that series is Yasiel Puig just came off the disabled list in time to make the playoffs. We haven't seen him for a good while. He's been hurt a good portion of the year. When he did play, he was good but not great. So what Yasiel Puig can do in the playoffs will... Puig, Kershaw, and Greinke will carry the Dodgers as far as they go.
Yeah, the Puig returning to the roster could go one of two ways. Puig hasn't seen live fastballs in a very long time, and Mets pitching can bring it up to the mid to upper 90s consistently. So either Puig turns into the world-beating linebacker that he is and goes ham on the Mets, or he probably goes in over for the series. And this Dodgers offense, which is better than most people like to say, but they are heavily reliant right now on the bats of Justin Turner, and Adrian Gonzalez. And if they can't turn to anyone else, this Mets pitching staff is going to be very successful against the Dodgers lineup.
Well, don't forget about the young rookie, and I'm not talking about Jock Peterson, the other
Are you talking about
Dodgers.
Kike
No,
Hernandez?
not Kike. Who's the Dodgers rookie that they just called up, the shortstop, who's been everybody's so excited about?
Oh man, this is
Corey
weird
Seager.
Corey Seager. That's
Corey
true.
Seager. Corey Seager, ever since he got called up, I want to say in late August or early September, he's been doing really well, and he's been starting at shortstop now. So
We'll see how
Dodgers fans are expecting big things of Corey Seager. Now let's go to the American League. The one-game wild card playoff is going to be hosted by the New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium versus the Houston Astros, who were leading their division for a good chunk of the year. In fact, they were about 8 games up in August at one point. But the Rangers came from behind and took the division away from them, so now they are the second wild card team and have to face the Yankees in New York. And now I'm sure everybody outside of New York and greater Yankees Nation is rooting for Houston on that one because, with Alex Rodriguez's resurgence, there's a lot of reasons for non-Yankee fans to hate the New York Yankees.
Absolutely. Call it the curse of Taylor Swift. Are you familiar with what happened to the Astros and T-Sizzle earlier this season?
Did she play a concert over there? What happened?
No, what happened was Taylor Swift was scheduled to play a concert at Minute Maid Park in October. Now, the Astros, at the beginning of the season, announced that if the Astros were to make the playoffs, that Taylor Swift's concert would have to be moved. And everybody laughed at that, of course, because at the beginning of the season, there was
Weren't they one of the worst teams in the American League last year?
For the past 4 years, the Astros have been in the American League basement, and the idea of the Astros coming out with probably a tongue-in-cheek announcement like that was super funny to everyone until the Astros started winning. And apparently, if you piss off Taylor Swift, your playoff chances tend to go down the drain. Houston recovered slightly and gave us the one good end of the season race that we were looking for. In fact, it came down to game 162 for the Angels and the Astros. It could have easily gone to a game 163. But the Astros they recovered very well in the last half of September, and they have a fighting chance. I'm sure they would have much preferred to host their own division series, but they are going up against a very vulnerable Yankees team and have a very good shot of losing to the Royals in the division series eventually.
Yeah, and so that's how we expect it to go. The winner of that wild card game will face the Kansas City Royals, who are the number one seed in the American League and not exactly the underdogs that they were last year. And they seem to have been not making that many friends along the way. I recall quite a few brawls up in Toronto and in other places. The Royals they're on their own island, but they're doing pretty well for themselves.
Have you ever seen such a quick turnaround from a franchise being so universally beloved for a very short time, during last year's playoffs, to a franchise that is almost universally loathed outside of Missouri?
I don't think I ever have. And I gotta say, the beloved team in the American League last year is not the Kansas City Royals, it's the Toronto Blue Jays, who won their division after coming behind. The Yankees led for a good portion, but never by that much. Never by more than like 2 or 3 games, if I recall correctly. And then the Toronto Blue Jays started having the best offense in the baseball history for I don't know how long, but they just hit home run after home run after home run and base hit home run. And then they got David Price to be their ace. And who's the guy they got? Troy Tulowitzki is they got earlier in the year, right? And
yeah,
he's been
Tulo
very
became
productive for
their
them.
starting shortstop. They sent Jose Reyes to Colorado and a few minor league prospects in exchange for Tulowitzki, who's turned out to be a very manageable front of the order man. And there are 9 players currently in Major League Baseball, at the end of the season, I should say. 9 players finished the season with 40 home runs or more. 2 of them were on the Blue Jays, and Edwin Encarnacion finished with 39. So they were very close to having a third of the 40 home run hitters in the entire league, which is pretty phenomenal.
So, and if you haven't seen the games in Toronto this year, that place can get rocking. I would say Toronto and New York, when the Mets really started winning, are definitely among the best atmospheres in baseball right now. And
This is a symptom of Montreal moving to Washington because now all of Canada is getting behind the Blue Jays. There was an interesting video I saw earlier. Canadian Parliament was debating a law or doing other parliamentary things that Canada does. I'm not sure how Canadian Parliament works, but they stopped their session when it was announced that the Blue Jays had clinched their division. The Blue Jays mascot went into Parliament to a rousing standing ovation, and they had a celebration. Like, an entire country's government stopped their proceedings for, a good 2-3 minutes to recognize a baseball team. This isn't a hockey team we're talking about. This is a baseball team that's exciting an entire country, and it's really cool to see.
yeah, and Toronto is really becoming quite the sports town, with the Raptors and their recent success and the city being behind them 100%. All that needs to happen is for the Maple Leafs to pick it up a little bit, I would say.
How many Drake sightings do you think we'll find in the playoffs?
Well, it's tough because not like NBA where the super fans can get right up in the action, but I'm sure Drake will be very close to the action, either behind home plate or on the side somewhere. And I'm sure we'll get plenty of close-ups of him and maybe Serena Williams if he wants to bring her along.
Yeah, that I think that'll be the most ringing endorsement we can find. Canada's most famous person giving his thumbs up to the Blue Jays. I can't wait for it to happen. And the another fascinating mess of this 2015 playoff season is that we have been told by experts and players and managers that the playoffs are unpredictable, that they're essentially a crapshoot. But give me a team besides Toronto that you think has a chance to win.
The American League or win it all?
The American League. The World Series, I think, is more up for grabs. But in terms of what's going on in the American League, they're not even the top seed, and I can't think of any reason why I would choose any team but Toronto to win the pennant.
The Toronto is definitely the favorite. Kansas City, they've been going into the postseason on somewhat of a skid, so they need to, right that ship pretty quickly. But we are remiss. We shouldn't forget to talk about Toronto's opponent in the division series, the Texas Rangers, who took the division away from the Astros and the Angels, who also led at one point and are now solidly out of the playoffs. Although they had a chance up until the very last day, and the day before the last day they completed a miraculous, I want to say, like 5 or 6 run comeback to stay in it.
Yeah. One of the most underrated signings, I think, from the trade deadline, the Rangers going out of their way to get Cole Hamels from the Phillies, is what solidified their mark in the second half. They finally got that ace, probably in preparation for a one-game playoff, but as it turns out, they're not going to need him for a one-game playoff. They have at least 3 more to play. And solid signing by the Rangers, terribly undervalued pitcher in Cole Hamels, I believe, has now led them to greener pastures.
Well, that'll be a series to watch, but
interesting.
We'll see how. Oh, I was just going to say we'll see how the Rangers hold up against Toronto's long ball.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very quick series. But an interesting side note about the Rangers, their peak was in 2010, 2011 when they won the pennant. And in those days, they forewent, I think would be the proper conjugation, a champagne celebration because their team MVP, Josh Hamilton, was struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. And as a show of good mercy by the team, they celebrated with ginger ale instead of champagne and beer, like every other team does. After Hamilton left, the Rangers went in a skid, no chances at the playoffs. But the Rangers started off this season hot and acquired Josh Hamilton in the middle of the season. So their first celebration in a while now has to again be celebrated with ginger ale instead of champagne and beer. So for three successive playoff runs, there has been no alcohol in the Rangers clubhouse, which I find fascinating. I think that's what's going to define the Rangers streak between 2009 and now. This is the ginger ale team.
Yeah, I kind of like that. It's a nice contrast to the rest of the league. I mean, it's fun to see guys celebrating and smoking big fat cigars, and that Yankees backup catcher talking about how we're all on the same page, and that page is drinking. Like, that's fun, but, like, it's also, like, nice to see that, like, team showing solidarity with a guy who's had his struggles.
Yeah, and they could have easily told Josh Hamilton, who's no longer the same player he was when he was the team MVP in 2010 and 2011, to, like, quietly go outside while we have our drug celebration. But they stuck with it, and that shows that the Texas Rangers care about players that even are as low on the totem pole as Josh Hamilton. And if I were a free agent looking at, a tax-free haven like the state of Texas, I would be very interested in looking at the Rangers franchise as a ball club that takes care of its own. And I think that's a very good show of solidarity by the Rangers ball club. I wouldn't undervalue that move.
Yeah, I think Josh Hamilton still means a lot to them for what he did for them in past years. And the club means a lot to him, and he seems to be much happier there than he was in Los Angeles. That's all of the Major League Baseball playoff teams, and it's kind of strange to think about because there's not a lot of playoff teams in baseball, really.
Nope. There were even fewer until a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Major League Baseball and the NBA have the same number of teams in their league, but the NBA has way more playoff teams. I guess we could just talk about, like, playoffs in general for a bit, because I don't know, do you feel like the NBA has too many playoff teams and baseball got it just right, or does baseball have too few? Like, what do you think about that?
I think the ideal playoff system in American sports right now is the NFL. I think 6 teams in a 30 or 32 team league, or actually 12 teams, feels right. That feels like those teams are just successful enough to warrant a shot at a title. Because if you look at the NBA, for example, your 6 seeds, your 7 seeds, your 8 seeds, they rarely advance beyond the first round. The first round of the NBA playoffs, man, they're really hard to watch. It's not terribly interesting.
Yeah.
And to think that the first round of the NBA playoffs are the reason why they extend for 2 months, why do you need to have them? Baseball figures out its postseason in 3 weeks. Baseball has by far the longest regular season and by far the shortest postseason. And you don't leave feeling unsatisfied. You leave the MLB postseason with many exciting memories. It rarely drags. Quick team or bad teams are dispatched with rather quickly, and you have 3 series and done. You don't get that in the NHL. You don't get that in the NBA. The one thing I will complain about with Major League Baseball is the 1-game playoff. It feels forced. It feels very artificial. It feels like they're trying to create excitement that naturally came every 5 or 6 years with the 1-game playoff as it naturally occurred. But I think that was where the excitement came from. The wait in between those 1-game playoffs that we had. Now that we have 2 every year, it's not terribly exciting for me.
Well, I don't know. I think, yes, you're definitely right in saying that the mandatory 1-game playoff in each league is certainly an attempt to manufacture an exciting atmosphere and good TV ratings. But I gotta tell you, it works on me because I like baseball, and I love baseball when it's win or go home. And I love getting to see one win or go home game every year to start the playoffs. I feel like it gets you ready for like the rest of the playoffs, and like what's your appetite for that, win or go home thing that won't come for a couple of games after the division series starts.
And I probably shouldn't badmouth the idea of manufactured excitement, because the American playoff system as we have it is manufactured excitement. This is not an effective way to determine which team played the best in an entire season. If we were to do that, we would just follow the European soccer model. But playoffs are exciting, so we accept it anyway.
Yeah,
And
it's just kind of one of the idiosyncrasies of American sport.
how often does the best team in the regular season of a given league win the title? It happens often in the NBA. I happens less often, but still pretty often in the NFL. But it rarely happens in hockey, and I think even less so in baseball. Baseball has its way of producing so many underdogs as World Series champions, and that's kind of fun for the casual viewer.
It's very fun. Like most of the teams in the World Series last year had to play in the one game playoff to get there.
Yeah, and that's fun, and that's the way Major League Baseball thinks it can get the casual viewer in, and I have to disagree wholeheartedly because you get the casual viewer in when you get the Yankees in the World Series and the Red Sox.
That's
the Dodgers.
true. Yeah, that's true.
That's how you get the casual.
The NBA has proved that when you get major markets in the playoffs consistently, you get a lot of money heading your way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the ratings for last year's finals were pretty good, but I mean, if your market is Northeast Ohio and East Bay, California, like, what are you really getting at? You really want that LA, New York, Boston market to flood the airwaves.
Yeah. But as a baseball fan who just likes watching good baseball, I gotta tell you, I'm not complaining. So, I mean, that's all we can really say about the baseball playoffs coming up until they start happening, because today is Monday. Is it the American League wildcard game tomorrow, or is it the National League?
I do believe they put the less interesting one on Tuesday and the more interesting one on Wednesday for obvious reasons. But yeah, American League. Oh my goodness, I can't say words. Houston and New York will play tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern, and on Wednesday, the Cubs will go to Pittsburgh to play at 8 o'clock Eastern, I believe, both in prime time.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'll be watching both of those. Now, speaking of other major sporting events, I got tickets to see the USA play Mexico at the Rose Bowl. And this isn't a friendly. This is a one-game playoff. Hey, one-game playoffs, how about that? Into the Confederations Cup, which is next year. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Confederations Cup is a big tournament. Is it the Confederations Cup? I want to be sure I'm clear about this.
Yeah. The Confederations Cup is the warm-up tournament for the World Cup. It is used as I think, logistics practice for the host country. So, for instance, in 2013, Brazil hosted the Confederations Cup to warm up for their hosting in 2014. The United States represented CONCACAF in that Confederations Cup and almost won it. They were runners-up to the host country, Brazil, in that tournament. However, the Confederations Cup, even though it's not nearly as prestigious as the World Cup, as only, I think, 8 countries are invited to the tournament itself, it's an important marker for provincial dominance because the invited teams are the best teams in their respective geographical area of the world. And for lesser teams like the United States, for instance, it's a way to possibly show some international competence, as they did in 2013 when they beat Spain and they beat Brazil and then lost to Brazil eventually on the way to the final.
Yeah, and it's very good for a team like the USA to get experience versus the first teams of the best teams in the world. And so I've never been to a USA soccer game. I've never been to a USA-Mexico game. I've never been to a USA-Mexico game that wasn't a friendly. So I expect it to be a pretty rowdy atmosphere, but I honestly cannot wait.
Yeah, use your height, be big. If any, bears come attacking, just make as much noise as possible, and you should be fine.
I gotta say, do I deck myself out in American flag gear? Is that too gaudy? Like, what do I do?
You won't be alone. I recommend finding friends if you do that.
Well, I
Uh,
have one more ticket to go with, and my dad said that I should find a friend, so I was thinking of inviting Trevor, maybe.
yeah, yeah, do what you need to do. And be happy this isn't at the Azteca, because that is the third ring of the inferno for American soccer fans.
Those the ones that make the journey to the Azteca. Hats off to them because I wouldn't do that.
No, no. First of all, you're going to a place that's a mile above sea level. I can't imagine breathing in that stadium, much less figuring out how to survive.
Yeah, and it's bad enough if you're a player on the field with people throwing batteries and whatever at you,
Oh,
or it's
goodness.
shining laser pointers in your face. But if you're in the stands, I don't know. I recently the Montreal Impact of the MLS played a CONCACAF Champions League game in the Azteca, and I saw a video of after the game, which Montreal got an away draw at, which was a very, very good result at the Azteca versus Club America. I saw a video of some Montreal fans who had made the journey getting like pelted by objects as they tried to retreat hastily.
Yeah, soccer fans are not the most level-headed people, as I have discovered in this country as well. I've heard it is worse in Mexico than it is in Spain, but yeah, if you're a well-meaning and respectful and shy individual, you might want to avoid national team soccer games with tournament implications.
Well, I gotta say, it's on my sports bucket list, and I think I'm gonna have a blast. I wonder if there's any place to tailgate, though, because I doubt there'll be much room anywhere around the Rose Bowl to do anything.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they use most of their real estate to park the cars themselves, and it's bumper to bumper parking out there. They use the golf courses to park cars. They would park cars in the sand traps if they could legally. But yeah, you'll have a tough time finding it in at the Rose Bowl itself. You can go into Old Town and hit up some bars or something. Otherwise, I would not be optimistic about tailgating.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to it, and I will. I think we should probably do a pod next week or something, so I could get an update on how that was.
Yeah,
But
totally.
speaking of sports, for you, are you planning to visit any sporting events while you're in Spain? I mean, you're going to be there for a while.
I have already been to two and a half soccer games.
Oh, well, what
I
teams?
I visited Getafe, which is in the south of the city. They played Levante. Getafe is probably the fourth most popular team in Madrid. It was a very unremarkable game. Both Getafe and Levante, unfortunately, are in the bottom two standings in La Liga, so it didn't have, the
But they
quality.
are in the top division.
They're in the Primera Division, yes. So it was, technically a high-level game, but it was very sparsely populated. Not too much fan interaction. It was a pretty boring experience overall. Getafe won 3-0, 3 goals scored after the 80th minute. So that was an exciting turn of events. Yesterday was actually a very big soccer day in Madrid. I started by going to the Rayo Vallecano game. Vallecano is a team in the Vallecas section of Madrid, which is a very alternative part of the city. It is very, very left-wing. A lot of anarchists and socialist collectives and syndicates run out of Vallecas. And Rayo is the leftist team. They are most known as the most anti-fascist. They are the most anti-racist team in Madrid. They are also the least successful team in Madrid, but their stadiums were packed, and they would have been loud had it not been for their supporters' strike that they were going through. So it was very interesting to see an entire section of supporters sitting quietly throughout a game because they refused to bring in flags and flares and
Did
they
you figure
refused
out
to
what the
chant.
supporter strike was all about?
I did. There was an incident in the preseason between supporters groups of two different clubs that had nothing to do with Rayo. The ultras for these clubs, which are the ultra-conservative members, very radical, often associated with neo-Nazism, they apparently had a brawl, and there was a chase. I'm not sure which clubs were involved, but according to my sources, one of the supporters for a team was led off a bridge into a river and drowned. So, as a result, many clubs in Spain have banned flags and flares and smoke and fireworks and banners for their supporters clubs, thinking that a ban on these contraband will effectively squash any sort of, super rightist action. Uh, the being the political activists that they are, the Rio supporters group said, "Hold on, we didn't have anything to do with this. In fact, we hate neo-Nazism, we hate fascism, we hate homophobia, we hate racism, we hate the patriarchy, and we're going to take a stand against this." So what the supporters do is they support the club, they pay for their tickets, they go into the game, and then they sit there quietly. And if something good happens, they'll cheer. If a goal is scored, they will stand up and cheer. But their supporter section is quiet, and it's really interesting to see because this is a political action. This is not apathy for a team that is currently in 11th place in La Liga, and their actions make their home games feel like road games because the team that they were playing, Real Betis, brought a section of fans that were nicely packed in a corner of the stadium, and they were loud. They filled up the entire stadium with their own chanting, and they had a tiny fraction of the actual stadium.
Wow, those supporters are dedicated. How long have they been on strike?
I think since the beginning of the season, which is about a month old. Each team has played about 4 or 5 games. And I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know how it will impact the club, but the political dedication from the Vallecano supporters has impressed me.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. I mean, we have supporters groups here in Los Angeles or here not in just Los Angeles, but in the United States for our MLS clubs. And I did actually hear about a supporter strike in Houston for the Houston Dynamo over next season. They plan to almost quadruple season ticket prices.
Yeah.
And so the supporters have been on strike for that for quite a long time. I don't know if they ever got that result. So yeah, it's an interesting common thread binding all, soccer crazy communities.
It is a very unique dynamic between the club and the supporters groups because in America, generally the clubs have all the power. They can raise prices depending on, how they feel in any given year, but soccer clubs have to respond to their supporters groups because they are the most vocal minority. They often determine how many people buy tickets, and they determine how rowdy the stadium is and how great of an experience it is to attend that stadium. Or
they provide
experience if they're super right wing neo Nazis. But there's a power and a control that the supporters groups have in European and South American soccer, I would assume, that you don't find in American sports. Maybe you find it in college sports with the boosters, but it's a really unique dynamic, and I saw it play out yesterday, and it was really cool.
Yeah, as a person who's been to a soccer match in Portland, where they have a very strong supporters group, I can tell you it adds real dollar value to the experience.
Most definitely.
So what else is going on in the wild world of deportes? I mean, we could talk about your New York Jets for a little bit. They're doing pretty well. Good old
They're doing all
Harvard-educated Fitzpatrick is managing games. Brandon Marshall is a legit number one wide receiver, which the Jets are very happy to have, I would think. And
what I'll say about this Jets season, and I have to admit I haven't been following the NFL as closely as I have in years past, partly because of a self-sanction against the evils of football. But mostly because I'm in Europe and no one cares about American football out here.
That's true.
What I will say about this Jet season is that This is very familiar in the sense that the first year of the past three Jets head coaching tenures have led to a playoff run. Herm Edwards was brought in, I think, in 2002, after Bill Parcells was let go, and he led the Jets to the playoffs. Eric Mangini was brought in 2006, and he led the Jets to the playoffs. Rex Ryan was brought in 2009, and he led the Jets to the playoffs. And Todd Bowles has come in this year. The Jets are 3-1, albeit against pretty poor teams so far. They really should have beat the Eagles to be 4-0, but with such a dearth of talent in the AFC in general, there may be only like 4 or 5 good teams in that league. The Jets have an outside shot at making the playoffs, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And that is the extent of my football talk. I don't know what's going on. Fill me in. What's going on in the NFL?
Well, the Dolphins fired their head coach just today, actually.
Yeah, I did see that.
Because, I mean, from what I've heard of people who watch the Dolphins games this year, they're a complete mess and total disarray. And a lot of Dolphins fans feel they should have fired Joe Philbin a couple of seasons ago.
Well, from what I've heard, the Dolphins essentially are the same team as they were last year. And then they added, allegedly, one of the best defensive players in the NFL. And the Dolphins were very close to being a playoff team last year. And you would think that they could build upon their success. And they haven't, which is fine. I'm cool with that. I don't like the Dolphins, so that's just fine with me.
Yeah, and, as far as my team goes, the San Diego Chargers, 2-2 so far. One off a last-second field goal yesterday. They look, I would say, an outside shot at the playoffs is their best bet. Probably not the division because the Broncos are 4-0 somehow. Damn them.
Yeah, how is that working out?
Their defense is the best in the AFC. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Because
it's not their quarterback anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I tell you, San Diego's not looking forward to playing them anytime soon. But you know what? I do have a cousin who's a big Green Bay Packers fan, and the Chargers are going to be playing the Packers this year in Lambeau Field. So I really hope that if we can win one game, it's that game, so I have a little bit of bragging rights.
Yeah, but you're going up against Rodgers. How can you...
A-Rod. I just hope that Eric Weddle pick off... I cannot speak. I just hope that Eric Weddle picks off Aaron Rodgers at home for the first time since like 2011 or something. It's a ridiculous streak.
I think the chance that the Chargers have is they somehow convince Olivia Munn, a.k.a. greatest woman in the world, to break up with Aaron Rodgers the night before the Chargers game. That's their chance.
Well, I don't think Philip, I'm so Christian, I have like 10 kids, Rivers is the one to convince her to do that.
No. Someone's... Who do you think is like the handsomest player on the Chargers? Who has the ability to woo Olivia Munn? And it's not just looks.
Manti Te'o looks pretty good.
Yeah, but Manti Te'o doesn't have the best streak with women. Come on.
Not exactly. Eric Weddle looks like a crazy hatchet-wielding maniac.
This
who we got
is
here?
An issue that we have in the NFL. The NFL likes to present their players as identityless robots that wear helmets and visors. We don't know how these players look. We can't identify the most handsome ones.
I know who the most handsome player on the Chargers is. It is Danny Woodhead, that little running back who is like our MVP practically, because he always finds a way to squirt through holes and catch passes for big gains, and he's a good-looking dude. I believe he could woo Olivia Munn.
He's going to have to wear, like, platform shoes, because Olivia Munn is not a short woman.
Yes, and he is a short man.
Yeah.
He looks so tidy out there.
Oh, poor Danny Woodhead.
No, I wouldn't say poor Danny Woodhead. He's making his bread right now. All right, so what else is going on? We covered the baseball playoffs. We covered USA, Mexico. We covered Oh, I guess we could talk about, basketball a little bit. The NBA preseason has started. Kobe Bryant scored a three-pointer and didn't do much else in the first quarter of preseason action versus the Utah Jazz in Hawaii last night. But, baby steps.
How do you feel about the NBA's realignment of the playoffs?
Well, let's see. For those of you who don't know, the NBA has made it so that division wins no longer affect playoff seeding. So the way it worked last year was that the Portland Trailblazers won their division, and so they were guaranteed a top four seed. So they got the fourth seed, even though a team like Spurs had a better record than them and should have gotten a higher seed. So now it's been changed so that division winning no longer matters in regards to playoff seeding. So if last year's playoffs were to happen under this year's system, the Spurs would be 4, and the Blazers would have been 6, and Clippers Spurs could have been the conference championship.
You ready for an unpopular opinion time?
You don't like it?
I don't like it.
Why don't you like it?
I'm probably the only person on the internet that does not like this realignment thing because I'm looking at it from a narrative standpoint. Had they been seeded 1 through 8 by record last year, Clippers Spurs probably doesn't happen in the first round. But how can you guarantee that it happens in a later round? We got Clippers Spurs. That Clippers Spurs series was the only interesting thing that happened in the first round of the NBA. And I know you can't make that happen with the way the divisions are lined up currently every year. I mean, that's essentially a crapshoot. But with the way the NBA playoffs are designed, 1 through 8 via record is just going to make the playoffs more predictable. And when the playoffs are more predictable, they're not as exciting. They're not as interesting. We don't get Clippers Spurs in the first round. We get how it should be. And the playoffs should never be about fairness. The playoffs aren't designed for that. If it was fair, then the season would end when the season ends and the top 2 teams would battle it out. But the playoffs should be made as interesting as possible, and the divisions allowed for debate. And now that the debate is gone, where's the fun?
Yeah, I do see that position, and I gotta concede that in any other American sport where there's divisions, like, baseball or football, not guaranteeing division winners a playoff spot would be insane and ludicrous and just flat out dumb. But it somehow makes more sense in basketball. I'm not quite sure why. It's just the nature of the game, I guess.
This is why. Basketball has balanced schedules. So in basketball, if you're in the Western Conference, you play every Western Conference team twice. And every Eastern Conference, or not twice, I think it's 4 times.
Yeah.
And then they try to play every Eastern Conference team twice or whatever. The schedules are balanced. In baseball and in football, the schedules are unbalanced.
You play a lot of division games.
Exactly. You play your division opponents more than you play every other opponent. So there is value in being the best team amongst the 4 or 5 that you are playing against within your own division, 3 or 4, I should say, because you play them more often than you would play the other teams. So, for instance, if the 7-9 Seahawks team that made the playoffs in 2011, for example, that team deserved to go to the playoffs because they were the best amongst teams that also played the same schedule as they did. And for that reason alone, they should have advanced. The NBA has unbalanced schedules, therefore the divisions make no sense. However, an interesting caveat of this schedule realignment in the playoffs is that we can no longer separate the NBA by teams who hang division champion banners and teams that don't hang division champion banners.
Because nobody's going to be hanging them anymore.
I mean, that's funny to me that the Clippers are so starved for success that they have to hang every single playoff appearance that they make. That's funny.
I mean, as a Lakers fan, it's easy to laugh at that. And even as a Knicks fan, for you, the Knicks have had success in their day. They have
Ish,
banners.
ish. If they have three, which is fine. It's more than most NBA teams, but considering the Knicks are I believe the second most lucrative franchise in the NBA, or at least the second most valued franchise in the NBA behind Los Angeles, there's no reason why they should only have three banners while 17 hang at the Boston Garden and 16 hang at Staples.
Well, it's a damn shame that Patrick Ewing never won one because those are some great Knicks teams.
Yeah, sure were. Had Michael Jordan stayed out for longer, perhaps it would have happened, but he just had to play in the same era as the greatest player of all time.
I gotta say, basketball is officially my number one sport now, and I cannot wait for the start of basketball season.
You know what? Basketball should be everyone's number one sport, in my opinion, because it's the most accessible.
Yeah, it's very much so. Like, even my girlfriend, who, like, hates, like, all kinds of sports, I showed her, Grantland's animated story time with Jalen Rose. You ever watch those?
Oh, yeah, of course.
And she loved them. And she's like, maybe I should learn a little more about basketball. I mean, because, yeah, like you said, basketball is so accessible. And, yeah, expand upon that.
It's so accessible. There's a basketball court in every town in the United States. Our infrastructure has allowed for that, and that's super cool. If you grew up in school in the United States, you played basketball at some point. You can't say that about football or hockey or baseball.
Yeah, everybody's played basketball in PE at least.
Basketball is also the only sport where we see all the players. We know their faces. We know their voices. They are fully exposed. And because of that, we can get hooked onto their storylines a lot easier than we can in football and baseball and in hockey. Basketball is also the shortest of the four major sports. You can blow through a basketball game a lot quicker than you can watch a hockey game, a football game, or a baseball game. And yet somehow the NBA trails the NFL in popularity, the Major League Baseball in revenue. It baffles me why the NBA hasn't taken control. Like, basketball should be our nation's sport.
Well, I tell you, unlike baseball certainly, and football most probably, basketball is on a huge upward trend right now, and that statement might be very different in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like, the NFL is envious of the NBA's ability to penetrate international markets. Because the NFL, for the last 9 years, has been playing games in London, and no interest is compounded because of that. But the NBA is huge now in Argentina and in China and in Spain and in Latvia all of a sudden, where everyone is a Knicks fan. And that's something that Major League Baseball can't claim, because baseball is popular, but not Major League Baseball outside the United States. And the NHL can claim it to a certain extent, but less so now that they have a rival in Russia that is, killing it in Europe.
Yeah, that's one thing I really like about basketball. It's a very international game. And while the players are still mostly American in the NBA, there's plenty of very great international players. And even some really great international players who don't even play in the NBA. Like, I watched a little bit of Eurobasket this year, and there were a lot of EuroLeague players lighting it up. And, it's such a global game, and it's so easy. It's like the world's number 2 sport after soccer, pretty much.
All right, so off the top of your head, off the dome, what does the NBA need to do in order to surpass the NFL in popularity? Because if there's any league in this country that can do it, I think the NBA is the only one that has a shot. What do you think needs to happen?
What's going to happen, I think, naturally, is that less kids are going to play football because of injury concerns. And, when you think about how schools are institutions of learning, but it has been demonstrated that playing a season of football reduces a person's mental capacity, at least temporarily, because of all the hard head trauma. And it's kind of insane to think that institutions of learning have a sport that has those effects as one of their main attractions. So yeah. I think the playing of football by a lot of families will end, and a lot of the top athletes will be looking to other sports like basketball and soccer. And you know what? I don't think the NBA has to do a whole lot differently, because if you look at the top athletes on Twitter, almost all of them are basketball players. And that's
Yep.
not an accident. Like you said, the NBA is very accessible. You see the players, you hear them trash talk, They're very in your face. They're in all the commercials. And the kids are all on Twitter. They're all on any kind of social media. Damian Lillard's Snapchat, I'm sure, is bigger than any NFL player's Snapchat. So, and that's for a reason, and because they capture the imaginations of our young people. And I think it's just the way it's going is going to eventually take over the NFL, because the NFL's fan base, like Major League Baseball's, although not as drastically as Major League Baseball's, is getting older. They don't really have much more room to grow because the NFL is so gargantuanly huge already.
Sure.
And I think just about everybody in this country who could watch football can, and the ones that don't aren't going to start anytime soon for their own reasons.
Sure.
So I'm not saying the league is going to reach a bubble or anything like that, but it might be peaking in interest in these next few years.
I agree.
And NBA has certainly not peaked yet.
I agree with everything that you say. One thing that the NBA has going for it that I think will allow it to grow in the hearts and minds of the general public, it's the most progressive of the four major sports.
Yes, absolutely.
It was the first league to have an openly gay player in its league, and that PR campaign was fabulously run. Great job by the NBA. They also have a woman on the sideline now for the San Antonio Spurs, and I believe another team has a woman assistant coach as well. I'm blanking on that.
Oh, yeah,
Becky,
I do remember. Yeah.
Becky Hammond coached a summer league game, and it is not out of the question to think that she may replace Greg Popovich, the greatest modern coach, to coach the Spurs eventually. They also have not the strongest labor union. Major League Baseball takes care of that, but they definitely have the most active and most vocal labor union.
Who is definitely going to be fighting for players' rights during the coming lockout, which is coming. When is that? When does the current NBA CBA expire?
Good question. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if they were next year. And it's going to be fascinating to see where the NBA goes, because the big fight between the CBA and the commissioner's office right now is how do we split this gigantic pile of money that is coming our way, and that's
is it coming?
That's a pretty good problem to have.
Yeah, that gigantic pile of money is creating drama already with the whole Tristan Thompson story. By the way, what do you think? What is Tristan Thompson going to sign for? Because he missed the date to sign the qualifying offer. So he's got to sign something, because sitting out a year doesn't help him. Because if he sat out a year, he would still be a restricted free agent instead of an unrestricted free agent. So do you think the Cavs' 5 years, $80 million is still on the table, or do you think they're going to offer him something less?
Now, the labyrinth of NBA contracts is something that is beyond my capacity to understand. I think what's eventually going to happen is LeBron James and their shared agent, Rich Paul, they're going to convince Tristan Thompson to take something under the max. So it could be 5 years, $70 million. It could be 3 years, $40 million. Something that allows LeBron James, the general manager and owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, to convince a free agent to come to the Cavaliers perhaps mid-season or right before the playoffs on a low bar offer, something along the lines of, say, how San Antonio signed, why am I blanking on the power forward from Indiana who moved to San Antonio?
David West.
Something along those lines, perhaps, and that might give them a little bit more breathing space. But Tristan Thompson is thought of highly in Cleveland's organization, and he's not getting that money anywhere else. No one else is going to sign Tristan Thompson to a max deal. Like I don't see him leaving Cleveland for any reason.
No, I think he'll be with them before day one of this season starts. And speaking of another interesting NBA move, which we don't have to talk about at all because it's completely inconsequential, but I want to talk about because I care about it. Anthony Bennett, former Cavaliers #1 overall pick and general NBA non-entity, has been bought out by his old team, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who he got traded to in the Andrew Wiggins deal, and is now a member of the Toronto Raptors. What do you expect from Anthony Bennett this coming season?
A lot of commercials. They got a Canadian in Toronto's roster.
Really?
That's
I don't
pretty
think they
cool.
would put Anthony Bennett in any commercials. He
Dude,
doesn't
man.
have the numbers for commercials yet, even though he's Canadian in Toronto.
Yeah, I don't know. People harp on Anthony Bennett. That draft was not good at all. And
Not great, no.
Anthony Bennett is the unfortunate recipient of some terrible forecasting by the Cavaliers franchise. And that's too bad because he had a lot of expectations on his shoulders and they didn't pan out. And sometimes that happens. It happens with most draft picks. He just happened to be #1, and that it doesn't happen too often with #1s shouldn't really be his fault, right?
No, not really. It is definitely the Cavs' fault for drafting him in the wrong spot. Although there is a question of who else they would have drafted. But then again, neither of us are NBA general managers.
No, absolutely not.
I gotta tell you, it's coming up on the fall sports season, Christian, and it's getting exciting.
Yeah, but don't you think that we should wait a little bit longer for the NBA to start back up? Because it ended in July, right? And how much November basketball do you watch? Like, I'm sure a lot of NBA fans watch the first week of action just because they're so basketball starved. But November basketball is just not great.
It's not great, but I definitely try to catch most national TV games. And, those are on at least several times a week. And, I mean, I gotta try to catch inside the NBA, on the Thursday night games on TNT. Come on,
Yeah.
that studio crew, you can tell they don't give a damn, especially in November. So there's bound to be some shenanigans going on.
It's the best studio show in television right now. There's no doubt about it. And I've heard a lot of people, Charles Barkley included, who call for the NBA to start on Christmas. I think that would be fine. I would prefer it to start a little bit earlier, maybe December 1st. Gives teams a chance to warm up and makes those Christmas games fun and exciting to watch.
Yeah, because as it is right now, Christmas is where the NBA season really starts.
Yeah. And November basketball is something that should be done away with. November basketball and May baseball are just bad. They're not fun.
They're not great, but I gotta tell you, those owners, and don't forget the players too, kind of like that revenue that November basketball brings in.
Yeah, they're not going to change anytime soon. If anything, they're going to extend breaks and make that 82-game season even longer. We might be seeing October basketball by the
there is basketball in October. The season starts in the 27th.
Hey, if you can put a betting line on it, it matters to someone.
Oh God, I don't. Okay, maybe we could do a little tangent about gambling in sports. Number one, I barely understand betting lines. Number two, fantasy sports gambling, you're not in America, so you've been spared all the commercials on our television about fantasy sports gambling. And it is gambling, no matter what a court or themselves say. But good God, is it annoying, and I can't stand the damn thing.
No, I completely sympathize with you because FanDuel and DraftKings have been advertising the hell out of themselves for the past year and a half. These were companies that didn't exist 2 years ago, and they've poured $150 million into advertising, which is pretty incredible. An interesting tangent, you say that I've been spared that sort of advertisement in Europe, and I have technically, but sports gambling is not illegal in Europe.
Like betting lines and stuff like that? There's not just one city?
Illegal. I walked down the street to my train station and I passed two gambling houses that are Las Vegas style casinos which exist solely for the purpose of betting on sports. And it's kind of tampered down in Europe. It definitely isn't as ubiquitous as DraftKings and FanDuel have made it in the United States. But the truth is, the United States is kind of late to the party. And I think we are getting the first big explosion. And we already have people saying enough is enough with the advertisements. But now we're starting to get the really well-researched articles that show, exactly as you said, that these one-day fantasy sports sites are preying on the weakest part of the human psyche. And they're sucking every bit of coinage and soul from ourselves. These institutions are evil. Gambling may be evil, depends on your perspective, and it depends on, your value of money. But the people running these, one-day fantasy sites do not have the best interest of their customers in mind.
No, I would definitely agree with that. And on that note, I think it's about time to wrap up the Coin Toss podcast.
Yeah,
watch baseball, everybody.
Has been brought to you by fuckdraftkings.com. And have fun if you want to bet. Bet responsibly. Do it yourself. Don't let Vegas do it for you.
And with that, I think I'll let Little B take us out of here. Based God, it's real on the streets.
Yeah,
See you later.
It's been fun. It's been real. Take care, man.
Lil B, Chance the Rapper. What's up, man? Yeah, man. West side up. Midwest up. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to all the beautiful ladies, man. What's up, man? We rare. Whoop, 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 whoop. Bass guys. Rare. Whoop, whoop. Feel me?
Out of thin air, I made it to a new thing.
Yeah.
Pull up in that Bruce Wayne, you should see me change.
Whoop,
Rare.
yeah. Bass guys. Call me so rare in this bitch. I'ma tell you about me and I'ma tell you about this. Little beef for little boss. They know my stilo. Coming through, man. I swear I got a kilo. Sniff that off me. Rocking off the top, man. They know I'm like coffee. I be in the morning. She be